electronically in accordance with the Governor Lee's Executive Order number 16, permitting virtual and electronic meetings during this pandemic that we're currently experiencing. Dr. Severe, if you'd like to do a roll call by district.
Dr. Gentry?
I'm here.
Dr. Gentry's present. Ms. Elrod?
Present.
Ms. Elrod's present. Ms. Spearing?
Present.
Ms. Spearing's present. Ms. Buggs?
Present.
Ms. Buggs is present. Ms. Bush?
Present.
Ms. Bush is present. Ms. Player-Peters?
Present.
Ms. Player-Peters is present. Ms. Pooper-Walker?
Present.
Ms. Pooper-Walker's present. Ms. Frog?
I'm here.
Ms. Frog is present. Ms. Shepherd?
Here.
Shepherd's
Okay,
present.
so
Madam Chair, you have 9 members present.
great. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Last time we had a few little technical glitches, so I think Dr. Severe has figured out a way for us to overcome that, and that if you want to keep your camera off unless you want to be recognized to say something, and then go ahead and turn your camera on so I can see your pretty little picture, and then I'll know that you want to speak. And then after you've asked your question or made your comments or whatever, go ahead and turn it back off again until such time you would like to speak again. We'll try that tonight and see if that works. And so we are going to go into the awards and recognitions portion of our program, and it's the Academies of Nashville Students of the Year. Each zone school that has academies always have an Academy of Nashville Student of the Year, and at this time we'll recognize them.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. This evening, we're excited to recognize the Academies of Nashville Students of the Year. These exemplary students have embraced their time in high school and have made the most of the opportunities that the Academy's model has to offer, including structured learning within an industry cluster and future career exploration. The 12 students whose names you're about to hear are future Belmont scholars, educators, audio engineers, IT and business professionals, and so much more. 4 of them are the valedictorians of their high schools, and 1 is a salutatorian. They are incredible students with bright futures ahead, and we wish them the best as they pursue their next steps in education and in life. So without further ado, these are the Academies of Nashville Students of the Year. Muhammad Hassan from Antioch High School. Caitlin Hayes from Cane Ridge High School. Denzel Harris from Glencliff High School. Peyton Fry from Hillsborough High School. Joseph Wynn from Hillwood High School. Caleb Livingston from Hunters Lane High School. Heidi Cortez Cuevos from John Overton High School. Kalia Davis from Maplewood High School. Pooja Patel from McGavick High School. Micah Gleaves from Pearl Cone High School. Jaya Eskridge from Stratton High School, one of my former students. And Delvin Porter from Whites Creek High School. In addition to tonight's recognition, these students are receiving a backpack full of gifts from the business partners that sponsored the Student of the Year initiative. A special thank you to Deloitte, Dollar General, the Loveless Cafe, Pencil, and the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce for their contributions. Students, on behalf of all of us, let me say congratulations and thank you for everything you've brought to the academies and to Metro Nashville Public Schools over the years. You are wonderful representatives for MNPS. We will miss you, but we can't wait to see what you do next. Congratulations.
Well, congratulations to all those deserving students. Thank you, Dr. Battle, for that recognition. These are truly the best of the best. We will be moving on to our governance issues, our organization with the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to pull off consent? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Fogg, if you'd like to offer a motion.
Yes, I would like to move to approve the consent agenda as printed.
Okay.
Tree with a second.
Okay, who seconded that?
Sharon.
Okay, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. Okay. Can we get a roll call vote on the consent agenda, please, Dr. Severe?
Dr. Gentry?
Yes.
Dr. Gentry votes aye. Ms. Elrod?
Aye.
Ms. Elrod votes aye. Ms. Spearing?
Aye.
Ms. Spearing votes aye. Ms. Bugs?
Aye.
Ms. Bugs votes aye. Ms. Bush?
Aye.
Ms. Bush votes aye. Ms. Player-Peters?
Aye.
Ms. Player-Peters votes aye. Ms. Pupa-Walker?
Aye.
Ms. Pupa-Walker votes aye. Ms. Frog?
Aye.
Ms. Frog votes aye. Ms. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Shepherd votes aye. Madam Chair, you have 9 ayes.
Thank you, Dr. Severe. I appreciate that. We are going to move on to the director's report. Metro Schools Reimagining in Phase 1, Dr. Battle.
Thank you again, Madam Chair and board members. I know many of you participated in the Teaching and Learning Committee earlier today, and so you are very familiar with a lot of what is going to be presented tonight. Before you hear our detailed presentation on the Metro Schools Reimagine Plan, I want to refresh you on how we got to this point in the Reimagine process and why. Most of you on the board were here during the MNPS Next process that started in 2016 and involved detailed studies of the quality of our facilities and enrollment capacities throughout the district. It is my hope to build off of that planning work to develop strategies and policies that will support and improve schools throughout the district. Metro Schools Reimagine is a comprehensive planning process that seeks to reimagine how we can best improve academic outcomes for all students. As a part of this work, the district is exploring new systems of supports, rebranded and strengthened academic pathways, and a focus on improving climate and culture at schools across every school and every cluster. One of the ways we can better accomplish our goals around academic and social emotional improvement is to better use our space so that we can focus our attention and resources to implement the strategies we've developed. Consolidating schools is never easy, and it can be a painful process for those who have loving memories or emotional connections to school buildings, but it offers us the opportunity to increase the purchasing power for schools to meet the needs of the students that they serve. At MNPS, we use a student-based budgeting model where money follows the students into their schools. Under these proposed consolidations, schools that receive new students will have additional funding for teachers and staff to support the education of the students who previously attended a school that would now be closed. These changes, while difficult, will let us focus our attention on improving academic and social-emotional outcomes for all students in these clusters. But this proposal is not just about consolidating facilities. Metro Schools Reimagine also redesigns what academic programming and student supports will look like in each unique cluster. It means unifying instruction and experiences for students as they progress from elementary school to middle school and on to high school on their way to college and career options. If the board approves the plan as presented at the specially called meeting next week, it will go into effect with the 2020-21 school year. This means students will report to their new assigned schools in August of this year. Rest assured, our HR team will be working with each teacher and staff member of these schools to ensure they have a placement next year. Our students are the reason we do what we do. Our teachers make it happen. We stand ready to support our students and our teachers in making this important transition. I appreciate everyone on the MNPS staff who has worked hard to bring this plan together and everyone in the community who came to our public meetings and gave their input over the past year. And I appreciate the board for its leadership. I know something like this is never easy for you, for the community, or for the students and staff, but I believe that if this plan is approved, we'll come out on the other side with better results and outcomes for students. Our priority is serving our students the way they deserve to be served as we strive to put every student on a path to academic success, and this plan does just that. Thank you again for the thoughtful conversation we've already engaged in during our Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. And at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Elisa Norris, who will walk us through our presentation. Okay, give us 1 second. Can we advance the PowerPoint slide? Okay, you might have to go back just a couple slides to the very beginning.
So we're just working through a little technical bug here, and
I'm
trying
here.
There's Dr. Norris. Thank you for coming back in.
Yes, my apologies. My goodness. I don't think, Mr. Powell, that when I take control, I think that might be some of the glitch. So I'm just going to ask you to advance the slide if you could. I would greatly appreciate it. I think that might help us out. So if you could return to the first slide, the agenda slide, I think that'd be a good place for us to start. Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Battle. Greetings, Madam Chair and board members. I'll be sharing updates about Metro Schools Reimagined, certainly looking at the academic side of this conversation, this all-important conversation that we've been having about how to enhance our learning environments. And then following that conversation, Mr. Latimer will be sharing some more about scenarios regarding how to enhance those environments through considerations of building use and capacity. I'll conclude the presentation with a timeline of what the work looks like moving forward, and then allow us to have some dialogue concerning what has been presented. Our goal today is to make sure that we have provided a comprehensive view of Metro Schools Reimagined. Next slide, please. So let me say this before I begin the presentation. My enthusiasm runneth over. So much has happened since last we presented to you all about the beginnings of Metro School Reimagined. And so I want to return us to the vision of Metro Schools Reimagined, because it is about creating those equitable educational opportunities for all students. It's about reimagining. And so as we started this work, we asked ourselves this very important question. What do we believe is required to move each cluster from its current state to a desired state? And when we came up with that question, it allowed us to really develop a theory of action with 4 domains specifically as their areas of emphasis. So in this Metro Schools Reimagined work, we are looking at instruction, asking ourselves, what are the instructional moves that are required? Certainly looking at leadership. What are those structures that are required so that we can better support leaders, help them develop the vision and focus, and certainly promote collaboration throughout the cluster. A third domain then is about culture. How do we, within the clusters, challenge the prevailing assumptions about what is possible for our students? And lastly, we're also asking ourselves questions about systems as we're thinking about Metro Schools Reimagined. Really, systems thinking is about aligning our existing resources and strengthening those community partnerships. In short, when we're thinking about systems, the question that we ask ourselves is, how do we operationalize excellence? It cannot be that only some of our students experience these wonderful opportunities in their clusters. How do we ensure that that happens for all of our students throughout the entirety of the cluster? And so for Metro Schools Reimagined, we want to prioritize that work around these 4 domains that I've identified. Next slide, please. So, Mr. Powell, if you can go ahead and click, because I have animation, so I think it'll be just easier if we have, thank you. 1, there's going to be 3 more, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. All right, so here is really what the work looks like in a nutshell. So I'm going to start down here on the bottom left. for me, looking at the context. So again, the context is the why of the work, right? And ultimately, it's broadly about enhancing those learning environments, but specifically when we're thinking about academic programming, what does that mean? So certainly for us, it means looking at student academic success rates, right? How are our students doing? How quickly are they catching up with their peers? How quickly are they moving along their academic trajectory? Also asking really important questions about teacher retention and recruitment. How do we attract the best talent to the district? And more especially, how do we keep the best talent, right? Looking at mobility rates. The city of Nashville has changed. Our borders and our boundaries continue to shift. And so that also has an impact on the ways in which we do business within the district. So that's part of our context as well. Looking at decreased enrollment, again, returning to the idea that the city continues to change, population shift, that's just how cities evolve. Well, that means something particular for us in the district. So at Metro Schools Reimagine, we're also incorporating that as we're thinking about how to enhance these learning environments. Always asking ourselves about culture and climate, right? It is in a culture and climate that promotes teaching and learning where all students can be successful. So thinking about that in conjunction with Metro Schools Reimagine more broadly. And then also asking ourselves the really difficult questions about supports and services, because as Dr. Battle has said, and certainly part of the conversation during our teaching and learning committee, is how do we ensure that all students are getting what they need given the supports and services that we do have available. And then if we go on around to the right, always asking ourselves questions about data, right? Looking at MAP, looking at Panorama. We've done some assessment maps in all of the clusters in which we're doing the work about what's existing, what supports and services are there, what's already working well. And then we've also distributed some surveys to our principals, because our principals are such a key component to the success of this Metro Schools Reimagine work. And then if we continue on, it's all about outcomes. How do we improve academic outcomes for all students, right? We are always returning to this idea, and one of the governing principles around Metro Schools Reimagine is equitable access. And I think certainly the district overall, that question of equitable access has been one that we've wrestled with in terms of what does it mean to really transition into the cyberspace of learning. So improving those academic outcomes for all students. Also ensuring that we have unified approaches to instruction throughout the cluster, so that an experience that a student gets in elementary, receives in elementary rather, there will be a progression of that experience. We're also seeking stronger collaborative tier relationships between principals across the cluster. We know that when our principals gather together and they pool their collective genius, that our students always win. Also, part of the outcomes is ensuring that we have consistent student and family supports. And I think our city and our district has certainly stepped up between the tornado and then certainly the ways in which we've been dealing with COVID. And then, most recently, the power outages. How do we ensure that support is consistent for our students and our families? We want to focus on those community partnerships, some that already exist. How do we leverage those partnerships and create new partnerships so that we can see what we reimagine for these clusters? And then also really strengthening that principal central office partnership. And that certainly has been one of the wonderful things, one of the wonderful offshoots of this work with Metro Schools Reimagine, to see principals who are in the schools doing the work and to see the central office folks coming together and really becoming passionate about how do we do this for all students. It's been a wonderful thing to see. And if we continue on around, here are the roles. When we're thinking about Metro Schools Reimagine, it's one thing to have a dream, it's something else to make that dream come alive. And so we recognize that through these roles that we've identified, we can make those dreams that are central to Metro Schools Reimagine come alive. So for the cluster leads then are responsible for coordinating the work. They facilitate the meetings, they bring all of our principals and our central office folks together to have these really important conversations and to ensure that there's a flow to the process. And of course, we can't forget our cluster principals. My goodness, their expertise, their experience, their perspective help deepen the analysis as we think about what we need to do in our clusters. We have our central office task force members who represent the entirety of central office, and they also are valuable sources of information. They can share their content area expertise because they also have a passion for improving student outcomes. And then our community members, that includes certainly our community partnerships, but our families. And we know that our community members, there's a wealth of information, there's a wealth of history that is also important. As we think about moving forward with Metro Schools Reimagined, it is important to understand from whence you came so that we can understand where we're going and what we need to do to get there. And then again, the timeline, I'll return to that at the end of the presentation. But I do want to talk a little bit about the process. So the process is about really generating passion and then figuring out how to translate that passion into actionable steps. So we've identified 3 steps in that process. The first is to brainstorm innovative strategies on addressing persistent challenges that impede student learning and adversely affect teacher performance. And I think it's important to note, as we're thinking about Metro Schools Reimagined, we recognize and we honor the work that teachers are doing. So even as we're thinking about what it means to enhance a learning environment, we also recognize that in enhancing the learning environment for our students, we are also enhancing the teaching environments for our teachers. And that can certainly be part of the strategy in terms of retention and recruitment. How do we improve learning environments for our students? And then how do we improve the working environments for our teachers so that they can reach their highest levels of teaching effectiveness? The second step then is to develop those cluster plans that address the scope of change needed to create a unified cluster experience for all students in all tiers. And Mr. Latimer referenced the plans that we have for each of the clusters earlier during the Teaching and Learning Committee, and I'll certainly address them again here. But it is about creating those cluster plans, and that's why we're bringing all our folks together so that we can have really, really broad conversation about what's required to change the clusters. And then last, always is the case for all of us, right? We are on this continuous improvement cycle always. And so for us, part of Metro Schools Reimagined is about progress monitoring all the change initiatives to ensure on-track accomplishment of identified outcomes. Again, it's one thing to have the dream. It's another thing to translate that dream to action. It's something else to reflect on where that dream started and how you ensure that that dream continues to remain alive. Next slide, please. So when we're thinking about initially coming together, talking about Metro Schools Reimagined, we were really trying to get at a sense of collective responsibility, moving beyond this sense that I'm only responsible for this portion of the cluster, and understanding that I have a part to play in the collective cluster. And so we're promoting this idea of collective responsibility through authentic collaboration. And so we have the 3 components here that are really integral to Metro Schools Reimagined. So you see here the cluster principals leadership team, and it's just that. It's about bringing our principals together and asking them to create the narrative of the cluster. And so in essence, we've asked our cluster principals, what's the story? What's your cluster story? What will be the story that's told about your cluster? And so we know because of their experience, they have so much to offer, and we're leaning heavily on them to help us redesign those cluster climates and cultures. And then if you go over to the other side, the cluster support team, this is when we bring our principals and our central office support together. And the goal for that team is to innovate and create new responses to persistent challenges. And 2 of our first do-outs, as it were our project charters and, again, uniform strategies. So project charters really are centered on those 4 domains that I mentioned earlier. Again, instruction, leadership, culture, and systems. And so what we want to do is take the wonderful ideas that we have around each of those domains and turn them into action steps through these project charters so that we can certainly chart our course, but more especially measure the effectiveness of the decisions that we've made. And then the uniform strategies, which I mentioned the first time that I presented to you all. We do believe that while recognizing and honoring the diversity that is represented in these 3 clusters that we started with, which is Maplewood, Pearl-Cohn, and Whites Creek, we also believe that there's some uniform strategies that are just going to prove positive and pay out positively across all clusters. And these uniform strategies, and I'll mention but a few, include mentors for teachers and principals, include community partnerships for personalized literacy. These are the things that we believe are going to recognize, honor, and give clusters flexibility in terms of determining what that looks like, but having a baseline sense of this is where we need to begin. And then at the bottom there, you see cluster support networks that Dr. Battle mentioned earlier. We know that we have to maximize those community partnerships. We know that there's a history in our communities that's so important that we need to consider as we're trying to innovate, as we're trying to reimagine. And so we need to tap into that history and that institutional knowledge so that we can ensure that whatever decisions we make around Metro Schools Reimagined, they're going to be the best decisions for our students and our communities. Next slide, please. So when we think about Metro Schools Reimagined, and I know that we've said this often, but it really is two sides of the same coin. A look at the academic programming and a consideration of the learning environments, they are inextricably intertwined. We cannot have an honest, in-depth conversation about one without also considering the other one at the same time. And so Metro Schools Reimagined is really about optimizing learning environments and maximizing student outcomes. So we can make sure that on the academic side, we are creating that continuum of educational experiences in a cluster. And one of the things that we know is that if we can demonstrate uniformity, that certainly will be an attraction for our students and our families as they're considering, what's going to be my next step on my academic journey. And again, those learning environments, how do we optimize the learning environments to ensure that our students and our teachers are operating at their highest levels of effectiveness and can reach their highest potentials? Next slide, please. And so I just want to remind board members of the cluster plans, right? And so we have the Maplewood cluster plan. And the Maplewood cluster lead is Dr. Michelle Springer. She's the associate superintendent of middle school. And so in Maplewood, and Mr. Latimer mentioned these earlier, in Maplewood, we recommend that the Maplewood feeder pattern be established as a unified branded AVID program cluster with an emphasis on advanced academics and STEAM. And what I will say as I go through each of the clusters is that across the three clusters, there's an emphasis on advanced academics. And I'm going to quote Dr. Griffin here. She says often, we can't expose our students, we can't have an expectation that our students would be successful at advanced academics if we don't lay the foundation in elementary. That is fundamentally what we're trying to do in Metro Schools Reimagined. How do we ensure that we're building on the supports per tier so that our students can be successful? And so we go on down to Pearl Cone. The cluster lead for Pearl Cone is Dr. Shun Turner. She's the associate superintendent of high school. And in Pearl Cone, we recommend the creation of a unified Music City Arts and Health Sciences cluster with an emphasis on, again, on advanced academics. And then for Whites Creek, which is led by Dr. Sharon Griffin, who's the chief of Schools of Innovations, we recommend the establishment of the Whites Creek Early College STEAM Academic Cluster, where students can earn dual credits and graduate with a high school diploma and an associate's degree. So really, when we think about Metro Schools Reimagined, it is the marriage of hard data and soft data, right? It is asking ourselves the honest questions about quantitatively, what do we know about our students and what do we want for our students? And qualitatively, what is the essence of the experience for students in these clusters? And what is the reimagined experience that we want to create through these cluster plans that we're developing? And so for us in Metro Schools Reimagined, we operate by 4 C's. We operate by a sense of commitment, right? All of us are in this together. Again, returning to that idea of collective responsibility. Secondly, it's about our competencies. All of us are asked to bring our very best thinking to the table because certainly our students and our families are worth it. Next, it's about collaboration, right? It's about our principals coming, and it's about our central office folks, and it's about our community and our families and our parents. It is about collaboration so that we can really make this thing come alive. And our last C then is about courage. It is through courage that we can reimagine a brighter future for our students and make that come alive. I am fully convinced, utterly convinced that through this work, we are going to create those cluster experiences for our students whereby it will be that their academic experiences certainly will be enhanced and they'll be well prepared for the next step, but also it's about the development of the whole person, the whole child. And so together, putting in combination hard data and soft data, in a way that helps us really tease out what it means to reimagine what's possible for our students. So before we transition to Mr. Latimer, who's going to take us through a more in-depth look at the learning environments, I do want to pause here to see if there are any questions from any board members or any comments that we need to be thinking about as we continue to move forward.
This is Amy. I just want to say I am so appreciative of this work. We have had stops and starts on equity conversations for many years now. And I'm really excited about some of the proposals that are coming out of this administration. I think they reflect a deep understanding of the city and the schools and the needs of the particular students and families in each area. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope that this work continues for many years, because this really is the way to solve many of the challenges that we have faced in MNPS.
Hey, this is Sharon.
Yes.
Yes, okay, sorry.
No, I wasn't sure. Yes, ma'am.
So I also want to thank you all for this work. And I do want to say a couple of things. I have some questions, but I'll hold them for later. And like Ms. Froke said, we've had a starts on this equity conversation, you know, over the past, actually in recent years, and been sidetracked and diverted away from it. So I'm glad to see that we are getting back to it. I'm glad to see primarily that, you know, this presentation so far has focused on students. And I think that that's the part that, you know, has been missed in the conversations that have bubbled up in the community, that we're really trying to do and make decisions that allow us to put the best resources and the right resources in front of our students, with a recognition of what their needs and what their opportunities and what their potential is. I do want to take a moment and thank Christian and Anna Shepard and Adrian Battle and Sharon Griffin for taking all of my calls and conversations over this weekend when you could have been continuing your Mother's Day celebrations. But I do thank you for your time over the weekend. But, you know, in one of the conversations I had, and you said it, Ms. Norris, in your presentation, that I think for such a long time among our priority schools, we have had such low expectations. It has been reflected in, again, you know, how we have not talked about it. It's been reflected in the starts and the stops. It's been reflected in the programmings that have begun and not been fully invested in. And so I think we have an opportunity in the timing. I would like to say that we would still be having this conversation, even if it wasn't, you know, the budget concerns that we're having right now. This is truly about how do we take the opportunity to create learning environments and programming that our students come out the way we say we want them to come out, the way our vision statement says, that we want to create students that are prepared for college or career ready. And we have failed a lot of our students in that growth and development. So I want to thank all of you for this work, and we can continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. All right, well, let me, because I do want to perhaps allow us some time at the end of the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Mr. Ryan Latimer, who's going to talk us through what it looks like to reimagine learning environments. And then I will return to tie it up with a nice bow concerning the timeline and how we push this work forward. So Mr. Powell, if you could continue to control the presentation, because I don't want to mess it up by trying to take control and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to leave it to you two gentlemen. Mr. Latimer?
Thank you, Dr. Norris. Mr. Powell, if you would, advance the slide, please. And one more. Okay, the district is committed to creating equitable educational opportunities for all students. Consolidations allow us to concentrate our supports and resources in ways that are focused on student outcomes, flexible to building needs, and is fiscally responsible. With this in mind, I'd like to give a quick review of the Phase 1 projects to date for the people that may just be tuning in. There was a consolidated Graymar into Jerry Baxter. We've rezoned a portion of Thomas Edison into Smith Springs Elementary School. 5th grade is to remain at Cole Elementary, leaving Antioch Middle School with grades 6 through 8. And we've purchased land for a new middle school in the Cane Ridge cluster. The district has identified other Phase 1 scenarios that I would like to present to the board. The district has been studying these issues for years, and we believe that the decisions, though difficult, are best for the students and the district overall. District and school leadership are hard at work on Phase 2 of this work, which has been branded Metro Schools Reimagined, that Dr. Norris discussed a few minutes ago. Along with considerations about building usage and capacity, the focus now includes an emphasis on academic programming. Principals and district leaders are collaborating to explore new approaches to central office supports and reimagining ways to strengthen instruction, culture, leadership, and systems in all the clusters, starting with Maplewood, Pearl-Cohn, and Whites Creek. Tonight's focus will be grade configuration, facility use, and zoning, which would fall under the systems category of MNPS Reimagined. Next slide, please. As we begin discussing the specific scenarios, is it important to go over where things stand now? This slide shows all of the schools that we are going to discuss tonight. Their current enrollment, projected enrollment if we don't do any changes, the 5-year projection, capacity, current utilization for 1920, and the projected utilization for next year. Since 2016, enrollment at these schools has declined by 800 students, and they are all currently under 70% utilization. Next slide, please. The first scenario we're going to discuss is Buena Vista and Jones-Padea. The map on your left shows where these schools are, and the little blue to yellow is a heat map that indicates the students living in this area. We would propose closing Buena Vista and consolidating those students into Jones-Padea for 2021 school year. The Jones would become the new zone school. This would be roughly 150 K4 students and 2 pre-K classes of 30 students. 75% of the students currently attending Buena Vista live within 1 mile of Jones, as the yellow density on the map shows. Both Jones and Buena Vista are projected to have under 200 students next year. Next slide, please. Again, we have the heat map showing the blue density down at the bottom, and the red dashed outline is the current Robert E. Lillard zone. The district would propose to close Robert E. Lillard and consolidate the students into Alex Green and Cumberland. 51 students would be rezoned into Alex Green, and 145 students would be rezoned into Cumberland Elementary. This is roughly the area along Trinity Lane. South of it would be rezoned into Alex Green, and the northern part would be rezoned into Cumberland University. And I would just like to reiterate, as we mentioned at the 3 o'clock, that the district is committed to looking at other ways to use this facility or the property and to continue to honor Judge Lillard's legacy. Next slide, please. The district had also proposed to close Jolton Middle School and consolidate into Haynes Middle School for the 21-20 school year. As the blue to yellow heat map shows, the majority of the students, roughly 80% of the enrollment of Jolton Middle School, live in the southern portion of Cumberland Elementary, the 2 yellow dots that are most prominent on the map. This would move the zone school for these students much closer to where they currently live, as you can see where Haynes is represented over on the far right of the map. Students at Haynes would still have the pathway option into East High School, or they could go on to Whites Creek High School. Next slide, please. The last of the scenarios would be to consolidate the Cone Learning Center program. Again, this is just closing the program and not closing the facility. The closure of Cone Learning Center will allow MNPS to infuse additional supports into all high schools. The counseling department would assist these students and these schools with graduation planning and reviewing transcripts and contacting families. And then the next slide, please. This slide sums up the various moves. All of these calculations were made using our current K4-5-8 structure, but we would be able to make these changes and still go K5 at these elementary schools. The chart shows the enrollment for 2019, the new projection factoring in the changes we've referenced, the updated 5-year projection, current utilization, and projected utilization with these changes. Buena Vista would close and students would attend Jones Padilla. The projection of 361 students and the utilization would go from 52% to 92%. Robert E. Lillard would close and students would attend Alex Green and Cumberland. Both schools would operate at 83% utilization. Jolton Middle School would close and students would attend Haynes Middle School. Haynes would operate at 92% utilization. Closing these 4 schools is estimated to have a budget savings of $3.313 million, another $181,500 in other savings that's predominantly custodial and utilities. Mr. Henson went over these in great detail earlier, for a total estimated savings of just under $3.5 million. And I believe that turns it back to you, Ms. Norris.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Latimer. Mr. Powell, if you could advance to the last slide, please, I'd greatly appreciate it. Okay, so here we are with the phase 1 timeline. Today's the 12th, so this is about our presentation to the board, about our updates in the consolidation scenarios. We've also scheduled for staff and faculty meetings to inform of the possible consolidations or what that might mean, and also to assure our teachers that the district fully supports them, values them as teachers and leaders in our district. And so we will support them in making sure that they land someplace safely. We are scheduling community town hall meetings so that on the 18th, so that we can inform the community and certainly get feedback about what this work looks like moving forward as we continue with Metro Schools Reimagined. And then come the 19th is the opportunity for the board to vote. We're going to also host live community meetings where we will share updates around Metro Schools Reimagined more broadly so that our community and our families are well informed about the Reimagined work. And then summer 2020, that's when we begin the transition plan for school consolidations, should the board vote in that direction. And then, all fingers crossed, though I feel like it will be modified, certainly at the beginning of August, students would report to their newly consolidated buildings. And again, all of this is shifting because goodness knows our worlds are shifting ever so slightly every day. And so this timeline, however, does provide us with a guide, a map, to ensure that we are continuing to move the work forward. But more especially, it is about moving the work forward, but it's also about ensuring that we're stopping along the way so that we can carefully consider each move that we make so that we can ensure that we're getting buy-in from our families, our community, our teachers, and our students. And so with that concludes our presentation. I'm now going to open up the floor to for any questions, for clarification, or any other dialogue that we would want to have happen. And Dr. Bell, I do want to turn it over to you to give you an opportunity to share some concluding thoughts about the presentation so far.
And I'll just conclude by sharing, the enthusiasm around the Metro Schools Reimagined work. And the consolidation is only one component of the work as we reimagine our learning environments and learning spaces. So I will actually turn it back over to you, Madam Chair, if we would like to entertain questions, since we have a system by which we would like to approach that this evening.
As I said earlier, if you have any comments or questions for Dr. Bell and Dr. Norris and their teams, please go ahead and unmute your mic so I can see your picture.
I have a question. Can you explain the difference between the community meeting, I believe that's on the 18th, and then the one that's I guess after May 20th, what are those community meetings going to look like? How do people in the community engage in that? And what can the expectation of the agenda or the format would be, and the information that will be provided between the two meetings?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So the meeting on the 18th is specific to the families and the clusters that will be potentially affected by any consolidation scenarios and any consolidation scenarios that we presented here. When we're looking at the dates for the 20th and the 22nd, that is much more about, it's much more about our marketing campaign around Metro Schools Reimagined. It's about getting the word out into the community about the ways in which we are looking at how to enhance the academic programming in these clusters, and also an opportunity for us to hear feedback and receive feedback from community members and family members. So the 18th is specific to information concerning the scenarios that have been presented, and the 20th is also going to give us an opportunity to talk more broadly about Metro Schools Reimagined.
And if I can emphasize here, so on the 18th, again, it is about those that will be impacted by the consolidations. The following meeting is still very much needed because there's a bigger picture to this plan as well. And so when we're talking about the Metro Schools Reimagined work, it touches every school within the cluster. And so while your school might not be facing a learning environment shift, it still impacts the way in which we want to make sure we're providing equitable programming resources for all students. So that conversation and awareness is still very much needed.
Anybody else with any questions or comments?
Hey, Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, this is Sharon. So I do have a couple of questions. The first one is, I think I mentioned this, asked Ms. Griffin about this, and hopefully we have something that she can share. I think she does. One of the many concerns that have been voiced by community members around the consolidation has been that the timing of this is after the lottery is closed, or parents can apply or select a different schooling option for the child. So is there a way that we can sort of reopen that, highlighting only for those schools that actually have open seats, so that parents, because we do have situations where, we're routing, there's a situation where we're making that choice for parents when they had the opportunity, about a month or so ago, to have made that choice on their own had they known this was coming. So Dr. Griffin or Dr. Battle, is there something that we can share about what we're doing to address that concern?
This is Dr. Battle. I'm going to ask Ryan Latimer first to provide us an update about where we are and initial considerations from his team, and then I can follow up, and Dr. Griffin can as well.
I apologize for not calling on him, but I swear to God, I couldn't think of his name. Go ahead.
That's okay.
It's okay. Yes, the families can still apply via school choice. While the lotteries ran, they would go to the end of the wait list if a school had one, or if a school didn't have a wait list, they would go on in and we could enroll them. We are working on getting a report out, hopefully by the end of this week, early next week, that will list all schools that were in the choice process, whether or not we've allocated the seats, and if they do have any remaining seats, how many and in what grade levels. So again, we hope to have that out very soon.
And just to clarify how will they access, oh, and I see you twice, how parents would be notified that that's ready, and where would they find the application? Is it the same location as it's been in the past?
Yes, that's correct. It's available just off of the MNPS. It's through the new vendor, Smart Choice. And I could work with communications to get that out. And in any letters we send to them, we could put that on there. In the past, when we've done this after the timeline, we've kind of given them a one-pager that showed them what options are still available, and we could do that this time as well.
Okay. Just one more that's just on the top of mind right now. I do appreciate the data showing, because some of the other concerns that were voiced by parents was that the schools that we were consolidating or folding students into would then be at capacity. But I don't think we had any on that list that would actually be at 100%, even after the consolidations occurred. So I think that that's helpful information to have and to share that to people can be aware of. And I just, I appreciate the communications, and, we talk about this phrase or this concept of north winding people, and it's talking about an awareness of the need that we have, right, and making sure people understand. And so I know there's a lot, again, that has been implied in the beginning of Ms. Norris's presentation around what we may not have been providing for all of our students from an academics perspective, and even in a social and emotional supports perspective. So I don't know, once we get to the community meetings, if we need to do a little bit more to get people to the point of concern where the district is. So, is there more sharing of that information? That's just a thought. It's not a question that needs to be responded to here, but I'm just wondering that if we need to consider being just a slight bit more transparent about why, from academics perspective, right? And why we believe and how we intend to do better by our kids and do more for our kids in the space of academic support, creating that rigor, right? This is a conversation that started 3 years ago about increasing rigor in our schools. And so all of what's been shared in this presentation suggests also that that's what we're also trying to do, raise expectations for students who previously have not had much expected of them. So again, I just wonder if we may want to consider being a little bit more transparent about the challenges and what opportunities we are really trying to address in this transition. My next question is around the CONE programming. I know that if you could just either repeat or say a little bit more about, because the other emails from the CONE space have been, what are you going to do with the building? And I know we're saying that, and I think Ms. Shepherd, you may want to say something about that study, but we've discussed about how we're going to use, pulling a committee together for that. But say a little bit more, or just repeat what you said around, it was kind of quick, how we're going to address, what's the CONE student population? Let's just share that for public record. Who are the students at CONE? What student ends up at CONE? What are the kinds of supports that should be provided to them there, and how we're going to replicate that I think you said sending them back to their zone high school.
Yeah, I'm going to see if Dr. Griffin can help with part of this, but I will just say that there's roughly 55 to 125 students may cycle through the program over the year. We do not intend to sell the building. We want to keep it with MNPS. And there are several different departments. The pre-K department has offices there. There's other departments within MNPS that use that office space. We could look at other uses if we needed to, but our current thoughts are that we would continue to operate the facility.
Including the virtual school that's located in that building.
Correct.
We can talk a little bit about, Dr. Griffin, I don't know if you're on. If you are, please chime in. But with regards to the students that are served at the Cone Learning Center, they are typically students who might be over age under credit or might have some social emotional supports that are needed. The program is not intended to graduate students, so they have never been in the space of graduating students from the Cone Learning Center. Students, as Ryan so nicely articulated, they cycle throughout the Cone Learning Center. Majority of the students eventually returning back to their zone school or attending one of the academy schools, one of the Simon Youth academy schools which we're fortunate enough to have 3 across the district. In addition to that, we do know that the Cone Learning Center is one of our priority schools and is deemed one of the lowest performing school that we have in our district, but rightly so because of the students that are targeted for the program. And so as we've stated, part of the plan is to transition both the students and the professional professionals in the building into new locations, understanding and recognizing that they, will have and continue to have needed supports back in their zone school, and hopefully being able to leverage some of the professionals and adults that currently serve at the Cone Learning Center in the new zone location. Dr. Griffin, would you like to add anything else?
Yes, I'm having a few mic issues here. I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to say we did meet with the teachers and talk with them extensively about the next phase of the work with the Cone Learning Center, and we'll be meeting with them again. Met for about an hour yesterday so we can document some of the best practices and really track the students as they go back to their zone schools to provide additional supports.
Okay, so I'll just address a comment that Dr. Gentry made. I didn't want to have this conversation tonight because tonight we need to be talking about the consolidations and the closures of the programs that we offer in MNPS. But at some point in time, I would like to form an ad hoc committee, and I have asked Dr. Gentry to chair it, that meets with our different communities around the physical structures that will be vacated with these consolidations and closures. I think it's important that we do get community input because that's been alluded to several times. These buildings are important community structures. And so I think we need to give an opportunity for each of the communities to weigh in with anything that they had to offer about that. So, but that, like I said, is a discussion for a later day. It's really not for tonight.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Christian Brooks.
Yes,
I'd like to chime in if you don't mind.
Sure.
Partly because I hear from so many community members and I grew up out there. So I think people just feel close to me and I get it. I mean, my family all graduated from Whites Creek. My aunts and uncles, all the Loves graduated from Whites Creek. I went to Jones for 5th grade, Buena Vista for 6th grade before I went to MLK. I understand and appreciate that, this is a historically disenfranchised community that is banding together, that is reaching out, that is advocating for what they think is right. So we do appreciate and acknowledge that, but there are, I think, some rumors kind of floating around and some things that we just need to, or would like to make sure that the community is aware of. First, there's the idea that we cannot ignore our budget woes. We have been historically significantly underfunded. Before the tornado, before the power outages of the last 2 weeks, before COVID, we had students that were disenfranchised, that were not advocated for in the same way as their more affluent peers. Not only that, we have a cluster like Whites Creek that, I'll be very frank, some of our more affluent neighbors just choose not to send their kids to Whites Creek. So we have so many of those schools are under enrolled. So if it takes $1 million to fund a Whites Creek just for all of the bare minimum requirements, the number of students that they have coming in don't bring in enough money to keep the lights on. So the extra dollars that the district is infusing just to make sure students have, food and staff and buses that run, literally just to make sure that they have the bare minimum, those funds could be used more efficiently, more appropriately, to go into programming, to support enrichment, to think about testing for encore and giftedness, or to assist with remediations more efficiently. All of those things could help students that are there. And I do want to address at least a couple of the suggestions that I've heard community members make, because again, I appreciate that they're reaching out to us. But whatever we do, like I've had a few community members say, well, why don't you just put the overflow of the magnet schools at Whites Creek? Since it's so under enrolled, why don't you just use a wing for the magnet schools? And I understand how that seems really helpful, but we would really have to think through, how would the students who are currently at Whites Creek, how would they be supported by that? What would that do to their programming? Does it increase the number of classes that they can take? Does it push them any further? Or does it just further segregate them and have 2 schools in one building? We've seen that with some of our other collaborations, that they don't really work that well. So I just want to make sure that when community members reach out to us, that we are being empathetic, but they're also kind of reminding them of where we are as a city, as a state, that we've got to make sure that we're more worried about the people than the thing. And in this case, the thing is sometimes the buildings, and that doesn't mean that we need to ignore them or ignore the significance to this city or to, you know, our families. But if right now, if all of the schools in the Whites Creek cluster are at below 50% enrollment, the extra money that we're infusing really could and should be used to really better support those families, to better make sure that everything that a child wants to be exposed to academically or even culturally, that they can have that at their zone school, that they don't have to venture out somewhere else. I also want to make sure that you all know that just because right now we are $25 million in the hole, if what the mayor passes as a budget is all that we get, we have to literally cut $25 million of our status quo budget. And that's unfortunate, but that's something that should, as you know, Dr. Gentry was asking, you know, what should we do to make sure that there's a sense of urgency in the community? I've been sick to my stomach, and I don't want to make everyone else sick, but we need to acknowledge that this is dire. And, you know, this is something that we should have been fighting for at the city and state level for at least the last 3 or 4 years. But we don't have funding. We don't have funding for, you know, as some would say, the least of these, the students who can't advocate for themselves. And I think we need to keep that in mind, that we aren't just looking to be dismissive of certain communities, but we have to make sure that we're doing better by those communities, setting higher expectations, but also pushing in the resources that they need to meet those expectations. We can't just continue to ignore the problem or continue to dismiss the decrease in enrollment. I mean, families my age just unfortunately aren't choosing a Cumberland that I went to. I was at Cumberland 1st through 3rd grade before I went to Bordeaux, which is now Ivanetta Davis. I mean, I love that side of the city. I love that area more than anyone might ever know. And so if we can get parents to actively choose that school, that will help. But also, if we can do more on the MNPS side to make sure that those schools are infused with all the resources, supports, and programming to make it a school that parents want to stay in, then we'll meet halfway.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Shepherd.
That's fine.
I just want to add to that, you know, I love the idea, and we've talked just a little bit about it, and I'm looking forward to, you know, being able to share more in the space of the community members that'll be a part of these teams to support this cluster work and transition. And I'm just encouraging, as I do often, right, even if you don't have a child in the school yet, get involved. Get involved. And if you're concerned about where the school is now, help to be a part of making it the school that you feel extremely comfortable, taking your child by the hand and walking them through that door. You know, it's all hands on deck here for this work. And we appreciate the community partnerships that we have. And I don't think that we can ever wrap enough supports around our students. And so just look forward, and please, even if you don't have a child, come to the meetings, hear how you can engage and how you can support these transitions that are necessary. Again, not for budget reasons, but not just for budget reasons. We are elected for many things, and one of them is to be good stewards of the limited resources that we have. And this is our opportunity to be better stewards of the limited resources that we have, and do that in a way that, again, puts us in a better position to provide our students with the academic and social and emotional supports that they need to be successful.
Thank you, Dr. Gentry. Thank you, Christian. I appreciate both your comments. Is there anybody with any other questions and/or comments?
Yes, ma'am. Jill Spearing.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, when we first started talking with MNPS Next, one of the things that was a major outcome was that parents clearly wanted to keep their 5th graders in elementary school. And, you know, we now have 5th grade at Cole Elementary. Are there any other elementary schools presently or next year that will also have 5th grade?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Cane Ridge Elementary School has 5th grade, and so does Eagle View Elementary School.
Ryan, can you also highlight the phase-in approach for 5th grade going back to elementary schools? I know that's in phase 2 of this work, if you want to just talk briefly about that.
Yeah, with the 3 clusters that we've talked with tonight, Maplewood, Pearl Cone, and Whites Creek, it's our hope that in the 21-22 school year, we can go to K-5 in those clusters. All the work that Dr. Norris went on are looking at exactly what that means for us. Some of our policies may need to get updated and things like that to ensure that we're educating fifth graders in the elementary school the right way. We need to look at some of the furniture and some of the logistics and things like that. But it's our hope that we'll be able to phase fifth grade in at those 3 clusters starting in 21-22, and then begin work on what it's going to take to go K-5 across the district, which will take several years because in some areas we'll need to add capacity. These are the areas where we think we can go ahead and do it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Bugs again. I have another question. I actually have a question this time, if that's all right.
Okay.
So a parent reached out to me, and it was a good question. I remember back when we consolidated Graymar and Jerry Baxter, we were letting them know that when we consolidate schools, and when we did the same for East High School and East Middle School, that when we consolidate 2 schools into one building, that some of the cost savings we receive is funneled right back into the school to support them. And Madam Chair, you spoke earlier about us moving students from Buena Vista who have been under-resourced historically, moving them over to Jones and the different resources that we would need to make sure that those students are supported. What kind of reinvestment can we make in our schools, like in the Whites Creek cluster or in the Pearl-Cohn cluster, or anywhere when we consolidate, so that students benefit not from just the district benefiting in the cost savings, but that they benefit academically and or culturally?
Good question.
Loaded question, I know, and maybe one that we have to kind of flesh out, but I think the community would feel better if they can hear, okay, you know what, something is happening between Jolton and Haynes, but when my child moves to Haynes, this particular programming might be available, or there will be extra dollars for personnel, or just whatever that thing is.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I'll kick off, and some of the team might want to chime in. That is something that we've kept at the forefront. Of course, we wanted to make student first decisions, but this is really not about taking away from. This is really about trying to figure out how can we reinvest and really up our game and what we can provide to our students, both academically and socially, emotionally. So this is why we have to talk about the larger picture at the same time that we're talking about consolidations, because with the larger picture, what we have attempted to do, and why there's so much already internal buy-in to this, is that we did a deep analysis around the best practices, the appropriate supports that already exist within our clusters. And we're thinking very strategically about how do we leverage what is already working well across all of our clusters. And so part of that is about maximizing the resources that we already have available to us. It doesn't help us to have a middle school that's an avid school, but then the high school you go into is not. That is not the district being very strategic and maximizing the resources we have. We should be thinking about a pre-K-12 continuum. In regards to the investments with students moving into consolidated schools, what it will greatly impact, and I can attest to this being a school principal within our district, is the purchasing power. When you're in an underutilized school building and you're under-enrolled, what's happening is that the district is supplementing just to make the bare minimum requirements met within the school. But in shifting students and enrollments to maximize the learning environments, what the receiving schools will experience is additional purchasing power. So if you were in a school where the student enrollment did not generate enough funds given the student enrollment in the current school, in the new school, what you could easily see is that through the enrollment and the purchasing power, if there was a need for a social worker, now you have funds to purchase a social worker to support students. And so you will see a shift in purchasing power for schools just simply on maximizing the learning environment and its space. So that's just some initial considerations we've been looking at. We've also been identifying through these conversations in the Metro Schools Reimagine work, identifying from the learning communities what they need more of. And as we begin to identify that and target that, then we can reinvest back in those spaces. We can say now that this cluster is transitioning to an early college model, they need more supports around X, right? And we're really relying on our school principals, our teachers, our community members to be an integral part of those decision making process. So the most significant is the purchasing power that the receiving schools and consolidations will have to reinvest back in the needs of the students. And I don't know if anybody wants to add anything, Brian, Ryan.
Actually, I was going to, to board member Bug's query about how do we ensure that we're reinvesting. One of the first things that we've done with the individual clusters is really taken stock and inventory of what's existing in the clusters and what's working well, so that as we are reimagining the ways in which we redistribute or reallocate our resources and our supports and services, we want to make sure that we are making wise choices in that regard. What is already working well? And I think equally important to this conversation, what hasn't been working well that we perhaps can think of, reimagine the ways in which we're going to, whether or not we're going to hold on to that particular practice or find a new practice. And so what we're seeing in all three of our clusters is the pockets of excellence we're trying to take to scale. So as we're thinking about this reinvestment, let's pour into what's already working well and take it to scale so that all the students in these clusters can benefit from that magical thing that's happening.
That was perfect. I mean, like I said, I know that families and community members are frustrated just with everything that's happening, feeling so disconnected from the process, but there will be several opportunities for them to join in via the town hall meetings. I know some council members are hosting virtual meetings for people to chime in, and I'll be there for some. I'm sure other school board members will be there for some, so feel free to keep letting us know, community. But the biggest issue here is that we're not looking to sell buildings, but we do need to vacate them, at least vacate a few of them for now, to make sure that students have more access to more resources and new consolidated buildings. So thank you again.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
This is Frida. I have a suggestion that for the community meetings, or if you can provide it now, that's great. But maybe an example where this has been done either in a sister school district that's comparable or comparable to our environment, to our situation, just for a better understanding of how this can work to improve outcomes for students, that this is not just some
random
new thing that's coming up, that it's been to improve it somewhere else. I'm pretty sure we're not the first school district to consolidate schools, whether we have done it in MNPS history, that we can revisit it and show that it has worked, or show that in a sister school district that something like this has also happened, and kind of what my colleague Ms. Buggs said, shown that more resources can come to the schools, and show that there's a tangible example for that.
Anybody else with comments or questions?
I do. This is Rachel Ann.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. To piggyback on that comment from both Buggs and Frida Player Peters, I do think it's reasonable for us to expect for people to want to know what's in it for them, particularly in our areas where people have felt like they have, understandably feel like they have not been heard or listened to for generations at times. And so we need to be able to show in our community meetings some examples of what we're discussing in this meeting, of here are some potential outcomes that would happen when we combine the schools and the positives that would come of it. I think for us, I'll speak for, I guess, myself, we're excited about the potential new options we can provide, whether it's through academics and programs and maybe better schools for these families, but we're not excited about losing these school communities. And I think a lot of people, of course, are really tied to those school communities. And so we want to show that we are thoughtful. And I appreciate all the information we've shown here today. It has been very, very helpful. But we also need to show that in a clear, concise way to families of we've had a thoughtful approach, and here's what's going to be in it for you. And I also want to make sure that it's said that there's lots of reasons of why attendance is down in certain areas and within certain schools, it is not lost on me that this is an area where charter schools have had a huge boom. And so it's something that we also need to watch for as we continue to have growth within our school system and in other areas as well. And so I want to echo last time, because just in case anybody did not get to watch the teaching and learning or did not get to attend it, I'm so thankful that we are not getting rid of these school buildings and that we are preserving the rich history of both Lillard and Buena Vista, and that it needs and it deserves to be respected and saved. And so I want to make sure that we're clear on that in this forum as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Madam Chair, it's Fran Bush.
Okay, Fran. Go ahead.
So I don't know if you guys know, but all 5 of my boys attended Jones Padea Magnet. And to travel 21 miles from Antioch, it was a big deal for me for Jones Padea. Going back to the days that my children were at Jones Padea, there was absolutely amazing support at that school. And I know that anytime you have parents that are faced with change and wanting to know what's going to happen next for their school or for transition, because of course out here in Antioch, we're doing some transition out here from our schools. But I just want to make sure that when we have these meetings, that we share what the opportunities are, because that's what I got as a parent. I wanted to know because I was always believed in options. And to travel from Antioch to Jones Padea. Jones Padea is also an historic building. It's a beautiful building. Right before my last son left the elementary school, of course, we know that Jones Padea had got a huge renovation, and that school was huge. It's a huge building. And to make that transition 1 mile away from Buena Vista to Jones Padea will be a win-win for those students. But we just have to make sure that we emphasize the importance of why. We need to make sure that parents understand all the amazing things they can get and opportunities and resources in order to make sure that their children are definitely taken care of academically, emotionally, physically, mentally. So that's one of the sales for me when I chose Jones Padea for all 5 of my boys. And the teachers were incredible. So we have to make sure that once we be able to identify what their concerns are, we need to make sure in these meetings that we are coming prepared, that we are prepared so that they will know what are the pros, very little cons, because it is a win-win for everybody to do this type of consolidation for our students. So I just want to make sure that I made it a point, because I do have a very huge tie to Jones Padea Magnet. And to travel from Antioch, that's a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else with any comments or questions?
I do want to acknowledge something, and I appreciate Mrs. Bush's comments. And I also want people to know that that we also recognize that this creates a feeling of loss as well. Even though we know that programmatically and academically and resource-wise, we'll find ourselves in a much better position. And as has been requested and suggested, we'll talk more about that and what that looks like in our community meetings and why we believe that will lead to better outcomes. But we also understand for that family that lives across the street from Jolton Middle, whose child will potentially be zoned to Haynes, right? That's a different story for that parent. Right. And so we just hope, we just ask that people to look at the bigger picture, and even if I can sit and say, well, the majority of the students who are at Jolton should be at Haynes because they live much closer to Haynes, that doesn't minimize the feeling of inconvenience or loss for that parent. So I don't want anyone to also think that we are not aware and cognizant of that. But, again, we're charged to think larger, and we're charged to think about what's best for districts and the district as a whole. So I just do want to also acknowledging what Ms. Bush said about the benefits, understand that we do recognize that there's a sense of loss for some of our families as well.
Madam Chair, this is Bugs.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that, Dr. Gentry. The last thing I'm going to say about this, I pinky swear, just because we do have the attention of many community leaders and community members out in North Nashville. Just thank you all for watching today. Thank you all for advocating to us. We've gotten more emails over than I think I've gotten from that community in the last 3 years. So I just appreciate the desire to advocate and the shared vision and the shared goals, and kind of take a hodgepodge of all that you've heard tonight. And if you wouldn't mind kind of just adding it to your perspective as we add yours to ours, know that our goal is to make sure we're doing the best that we can by kids. And I'm sure any community member that's been to a meeting that I've been at, I've always talked about this chicken and the egg kind of conversation. Which one comes first? Are we able as a district that is under-resourced to make more investments in a community or in a school before we can ask parents to invest with their children? Or do parents invest with their children first and then the additional resources come? We'll keep fighting for that, to find that middle ground, but I will use one of my schools as an example, Lockland. Lockland may catch flack sometimes, but it was a school that was under-resourced, under-advocated for, and had a traditionally low-income population that it was serving. A few affluent neighbors, I think it was about 9 of them, came together and said, we're going to send our children to Lockland, and with that additional funding, with that additional PTO representation, and with that additional advocacy, they completely changed what happened at Lockland. Lockland is a thriving school, and yes, it has a phenomenal administrator, a principal, and a phenomenal staff, but that happened because parents were able to come together and rally. When we have families that are serving, or when we have families that are homeless, when we have families that are transient, as is the case with a Buena Vista, or even with some of our Bordeaux neighborhood schools, sometimes those families need advocates to help in and step in with them, to advocate with them. If everyone continues to opt out of the neighborhood school, then yes, that's how you end up with everyone going to Magnus or everyone going to charters. Very quickly, that was how I ended up at an MLK, and my parents and I talk about that all the time, especially when it comes to Christopher. The more that I say I want to send him to Buena Vista, the more they ask if I'll consider MLK when he's in high school. So we have to be having these conversations as a community around where we intentionally place our children, and then what happens to the neighborhood, what happens to the neighborhoods around us when we don't do that. This is one of those maybe unintended consequences. Once we did some redistricting about 15 years ago in the Whites Creek cluster, everything began to shift, and parents started sending their kids out of that cluster. Even when we were redistricted to Hillwood, the parents were sending themselves. I mean, it became a trickle-down effect, and now you have some very affluent families in North Nashville saying, I can't send my kid to the Whites Creek cluster, and we can't force them to. We can encourage them to, but we also have to match that with resources and programming. Budget, we need more money.
So my ask of Dr. Battle and her team is that you keep board members informed as to the various times and I'll say locations, although they'll probably be virtual, various times when these community meetings will take place, because, both the ones that are going to happen right now and the ones that are going to happen after, when we start talking about the structures themselves, I think that's something that, we as board members need to be involved with, because ultimately the decision comes down to us, and we can't make an informed decision unless we know what the community members, how they feel and what they think about those particular structures. So Dr. Battle, that would be my charge to you and your team.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Do I have anybody else that wants to speak? No? Thank you, Dr. Battle and your team. Y'all did a fantastic, phenomenal job with this. And as a couple of my colleagues said, this has been a conversation we've been having forever. And, finally, I see something bubbling up to the surface. So, thank God, because we have been talking about it for a long time. It's time to take action. And I think that we're moving, in the right direction. We will move on to announcements, and we're going to go in district order, and we'll begin with Dr. Gentry.
I just want to point out the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. I had some notes I can't find, but as Ms. Buggs mentioned, there will be a District 2, and that's Council District 2, meeting around what's happening in the Whites Creek cluster. and in the Pearl-Cohn cluster. So Ms. Bugs and I will be a part of that, and it's being hosted by Councilwoman Quante Toombs. So that will take place Thursday at 6 o'clock. Bugs, right? I think Thursday at 6.
Is
Yes.
it a virtual meeting or?
Yes, it's a Zoom meeting.
Okay, Zoom. Okay, good. Good deal. Is that right?
I look forward to seeing all the John Overton graduates on Saturday, and of course in a safe and distant way. And I appreciate everyone coming into the budget meeting this morning. Once again, we will keep you up to, or this afternoon, excuse me. Once again, we'll keep you up to date of all that information, and please let us know your thoughts as we have many looming budget questions and concerns.
Okay. Who's next? Three.
Yes, thank you. I have the committee meeting report from the Teaching and Learning Committee and then some announcements to follow. On May 12th, earlier today, the Teaching and Learning Committee met to receive updates on the Metro Schools Reimagined. And just in a nutshell, the recommendations are to close Buena Vista and send 182 students to Jones Paideia. The proposal is to close Robert E. Lillard, send 51 students to Alex Green and 145 students to Cumberland. Closing Jolton Middle will send 267 students to Haynes, and the Cone School will the school will not be sold, but 55 to 125 students will go back to their zoned high school, where they will receive services, and those services will be through the academies. The student-based budget savings will allow for reallocation of resources. Will go from 41% to 60% utilization to 83 to 92% utilization. And the estimated savings is $3.5 million. This week, and 522, is that this week? No, it's next week, isn't it? And there will be a special called meeting next week on 5/12 to vote on these consolidations and closures. In terms of announcements, the junior ROTC at Maplewood High School has won another award. Unit Tennessee 933 at Maplewood High School has been selected as one of 79 units to receive the 2019-2020 Air Force Junior ROTC Distinguished Unit Award. The Distinguished Unit Award recognizes personal growth and accomplishments of the cadets, the contributions of the instructors as mentors of the cadets, and the support of the school and community. The Distinguished Unit Award is limited to the very best of the best of our nation's 890 Air Force ROTC units. Congratulations to Lieutenant Colonel Martha Schaefer and the cadets at Maplewood High School. I also want to say congratulations to all of the teachers, principals, and support employees of the year. I want to mention too, specifically, Ricky Gibbs was the elementary principal, was named the elementary principal of the year at Warner. And I taught Ricky in undergraduate school at TSU in a literacy class. I'm really proud of him. And the other person that I want to mention is Helen Wells. She is exceptional ed parapro at Dan Mills. And Hunter's Lane and Maplewood, well, Hunter's Lane graduation will be this Saturday. There'll be a drive-through graduation, and Maplewoods is on Sunday. So congratulations to all of the graduating classes of 2020. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Bugs?
I had a whole conversation by myself. I'm so sorry about that, but
Sorry.
Nope, that was my fault. So thank you, community members, for joining us today. Thank you for advocating to us. The conversation is not over. I do want to highlight graduations coming up in my district. So beginning Saturday at 6 p.m., we'll have the processional for East. On Sunday at 10 a.m. is one for Stratford High School. And I will send a special shout out to one of our students of the year that Dr. Battle mentioned earlier, Jaya Eskridge. She is graduating a whole year early from Stratford.
Wow.
I think she earned a 35 on the ACT, and a lot of that was thanks to the Build Up Foundation. Hometown hero Kwani Cash has been tutoring students free of charge, completely free of charge, and they're earning scores like this. So thank you, Kwani. Thank you, Build Up Foundation, and congratulations, Jay. I can't wait to see you at Tennessee State. Then at 11 a.m. on Monday, we have a graduation for NSA. At 6 p.m. that same day is my alma mater, MLK's graduation. On Tuesday at 11 a.m. will be the Pearl Cone processional, and then Wednesday at 7 p.m. is Hume Fogg. I'd also like to shout out one of my colleagues and friends, Dr. Ricky Gibbs. Congratulations, a fellow TSU alum. Keep showing them how that HBCU grit is, what it's doing for you. And then I would also like to shout out our MSAP writers and our MSAP professionals. They have done a great job they did a great job writing for this grant, 3 years ago, and they were able to fund $23 million into 5 under-enrolled elementary schools. Schools like Warner, Inglewood, Whitsitt, Glengarry, and Rosebank. And Warner, if you've been into the school in the last couple of years, you've seen the tremendous changes happen, the impact of those professionals on those students. So thank you, MSAP writers, and they are continuing or completing the second round of MSAP grant writing, which could actually start to help us close some of the budget gap and start to infuse dollars into under-enrolled middle schools to provide pathways. So thank you, Jonathan Wren at Warner. Thank you. Just thank you all of those MSAP professionals.
Thank you, Ms. Buggs. Ms. Bush?
Yes, well, you guys know I like to party. So I am excited about Antioch High School's procession at 10 a.m. today. And we got 2 processionals from Cambridge, one at 3 o'clock on Saturday and 3 o'clock on Sunday. So I'm going to be partying pretty hard on this weekend. And I cannot wait, to a point that I even wanted a T-shirt made just because I wanted to be recognized and let our kids know that their board members out there rooting them on. And I'm so excited about the class of 2020. So I'm really excited about this weekend. I want to thank Dr. Battle and all of her team for all the hard work that they've done. I'm so excited for you guys. So we need to celebrate you too, right? So I don't know how you're going to get around to all those processionals, but we'll see, right? So, so I am so excited about this weekend. And I look forward to spending time distancing away from my kids. But I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be cheering and having a great time. So I'm excited. So you guys have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Ms. Freida Peters?
To echo what everyone else said, I will be at Glencliff High School this Sunday at 1 o'clock for their graduation. I just want to thank all of the seniors and MNPS for being so resilient during this time. I know it's not the graduation you would ideally like to have, but just I know myself, and I probably can speak for my colleagues, we do love you, and we thank you for your resilience, and that you do hold a special place in our hearts, just because this has been one of the random acts of gods that we've never seen in the last 8 weeks of our lives. And knowing that you guys are in our thoughts and our prayers, and we wish you much success. And we know that you're going to be the best leaders come to the future, because you have come through this with flying colors, and that you're going to succeed in a way that the generations before and after you wouldn't, just because you have survived this unusual time. But we just want to thank you. Can't wait to see you on Sunday, and congratulations.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper Walker?
Thank you.
Melissa is
Madam
now
Chair.
exiting.
So I'll just start with a quick Budget and Finance Committee report. We had a really thorough update from Mr. Henson and Dr. Battle about sort of where we are with finding places to cut costs to meet the expectation of the mayor's allocation that he's given us. We are still in hopes that we can find a way to meet the cost of the 6% COLA raise that we gave teachers last year. I mean, we are going to try to honor our commitments to them or we will honor our commitments to them and to many other things that are really important to us. We'd like to not touch school budgets. And so we're going to continue to advocate and work towards finding a solution so that we have minimal impact. But we have a ways to go, and we have some real sacrifice ahead of us. So appreciate all the hard work of the finance team on that. I want to just quickly give a shout out to all the 8th graders that were selected for the Vanderbilt School for Science and Math. They were announced yesterday. That's a big deal, and they're from all across the district. Really proud of them. I want to say thank you to Woodmont Baptist for bringing groceries while we were giving out laptops to students at Hillsborough. And I also want to just give a very special thank you to the construction crew that continues to build Hillsborough High School throughout this pandemic and putting themselves at risk. I recognize that that is a sacrifice for them, and we appreciate that. And then I also want to give a shout out to class of 2020 and thank them as well for their resilience and hard work. Recognize this is a disappointing way to end the year, but hopefully our celebrations this weekend will be somewhat of a comfort. I want to recognize Max Lawrence, who's our valedictorian at Hillsborough, be going to Dartmouth, David Ware, who was our salutatorian going to Alabama, and to Peyton Fry, who's our Hillsborough Academy Student of the Year in Global Health and Science, going to UT Chat for Nursing. I also want to invite everyone to watch Obama's commencement speech for the entire class of 2020 across the country. That's happening this Saturday at 7 p.m. on all the major TV stations. So I hope all the families will tune in to watch if they would like. And I will leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Fowler.
I don't have any announcements, but like everyone else, I do want to congratulate all of our 2020 graduates and wish them the very best in their next journeys. And we're very proud of them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just have a couple myself.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I finally found my notes. The date for Whites Creek is May 19th at 5:15. That's a week from today at 5:15 p.m. We'll be there processional in cars 6 feet apart for their celebration, and congratulations. And I just do also want to echo that you guys hung in there with us and you followed through on your responsibilities, and we really appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Shepherd.
Sure, no worries. I'd like to offer my condolences to the families of the 2 McGavock High School students who lost their lives in a car accident last Wednesday. The driver, Kevin Duke, was killed at the scene, and he had 2 passengers in the car. One of them, Aiden Sullivan, has since passed, and Jerome White is still in critical condition at the hospital. So I'd have to offer my condolences for those families. The driver, Kevin, was a senior. The other 2 were juniors. MNPS had several students who were nominated for All-State Musicians, and unfortunately they didn't get their moment, 15 seconds worth of fame. So I'm just going to say, read a quick synopsis. There were 13 students chosen from NSA and MLK for the choir. There were 22 students for band and 5 students for jazz band from Hillwood, Hume-Fogg, MLK, Hillsborough, Overton, NSA, Antioch, and McGavock. There were 13 students chosen from Hume-Fogg, McGavock, MLK, and Hillsborough for orchestra. So all in all, 53 students were chosen for this prestigious honor. The competition is really tough to make all-state musician. Our boys went through that, and it's a really tough competition. So these musicians are to be. We offer them our congrats, and in line with my colleagues, I will say that McGavock High School will hold their graduation ceremonies on this coming Saturday, and it starts at 9. I don't think it ends until 3 or 4 because you will proceed through your particular parade according to the schedule and what academy that you are attending. So we will be at the back lot on the Two Rivers side. So I encourage all the graduates and their families to participate at a socially distanced location. And I congratulate all of them on this joyous occasion. And seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending, everybody.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.